In 1789, perhaps the most influential revolution in Europe's history, the French Revolution, began against the rule of the French monarch Louis XVI. The causes of the revolution stemmed from the poor treatment of the peasants, the government debt, resistance by nobles to reform the tax system of France, and the unpopularity and weakness of Louis XVI himself. This revolution was inspired by many ideals of the Enlightenment, like self-government, freedom of speech, and equality. The revolution, led by Maximilien Robespierre, turned extremely violent in 1792, during the Reign of Terror. In 1795, Robespierre himself was executed, ending the Reign of Terror. The French Revolution marked the end of feudalism in Europe. A few years after the end of the Reign of Terror, in 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte came to power in France. After much military success, Napoleon had overextended French rule in Europe, and after a failed invasion of Russia, was forced to leave France after being defeated in 1813 at the Battle of Nations. After Napoleon's defeat, the other European powers reversed all of France's claims to the land that he had conquered at the Congress of Vienna. Also, Europe was divided up such that France was surrounded by stronger powers in order to keep France in check. However, the Congress of Vienna paid little attention to dividing Europe based on ethnic groups and also reinstalled the monarchy of France. During the 1800s, nationalism in Europe was on the rise. Many different countries, such as Italy and Germany, unified under one government. The Dreyfus Affair, caused by anti-Semitism in Europe in the late 1800s, also led to the beginning of the Zionist movement. Also in the late 1800s, the scramble for Africa occurred, during which many new countries who found themselves without colonies rushed to take African land that became more valuable due to the raw materials needed and increased populations due to the Industrial Revolution, the ideas of social Darwinism, and the white man's burden, as well as the heightened competition for power caused by increased nationalism in Europe. At the Berlin Conference in 1885, rulers all over Europe came to partition Africa into colonies. Africa was partitioned due to European needs, without any thought to those who lived there. During this time, many Europeans were led by enlightened rulers, who were generally more open to reform for peasants and laws, as well as religiously tolerant. Also during the 1800s, Europe became more industrialized, causing cities to grow and populations to boom. It was because of the industrialization of Europe that the growing class divides led Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels to write the Communist Manifesto, outlining ideals that would not take hold in Europe until the early 1900s. At the beginning of the 1900s, nationalism was at an all-time high in Europe. Thanks to this, as well as many alliances made by European powers, World War I began in 1914 with the assassination of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand. World War I was the first industrialized war in Europe, and it caused destruction on a never-before-seen scale. During the war, Russia's military incompetence, as well as the poor leadership of Tsar Nicholas II, led to the outbreak of the Russian Revolution in 1917. After 3 years of civil war, Vladimir Lenin emerged victorious as the communist leader of Russia. When World War I finally ended in 1918, the European powers punished Germany with the Treaty of Versailles, forcing Germany to take blame for World War I, as well as driving Germany's economy into the ground. During the years after World War I, called the Age of Anxiety, fascism began to take hold in European governments. Benito Mussolini in Italy, Francisco Franco in Spain, and Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in Germany all became heads of fascist governments. After the Nazis came to power in Germany, they began persecuting Jews in what is now known as the Holocaust. In 1939, World War II began when Germany invaded Poland. World War II ended in 1945 when the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. Tensions between the Soviet Union and the US after World War II created the Cold War. From the late 1940s to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the US and the USSR would be in constant power struggles, fighting proxy wars in places such as Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. Also after World War II, European powers began decolonization because European values were now at odds with colonial dictatorship, and both the US and the Soviet Union opposed European colonial empires. Thanks to the downfall of the Soviet Union in 1991, as well as better communication and transportation technology, globalization, or the process of international integration of ideas, products, and cultures, is currently happening all over the world.